Let's welcome to the stage Olena Rossi. Olena is a PhD student and associate lecturer at the University of Lancaster. Thank you, Olena, for with us, being here with us.
Hi, hi
Hi.
everyone. Luz, can you just check that I'm sharing my screen?
Yes, I'm going to share. You can start now.
Okay, fantastic. Right. Hello, everyone, and thanks for coming to my presentation on the role of specifications and sample items in item writing and empirical exploration. My name is Elena Rossi, and since the time I applied to present at this conference, I finished my doctoral program. So I've now got PhD in language testing from Lancaster University, UK, and I'm currently a researcher at the same university and also act as an independent consultant in language assessment. And if you wish, you can contact me on this email or on my Twitter account. Today, I'm going to talk about the role of item specifications and also example items in producing language tests. Test specifications, sometimes accompanied with item writing guidelines, is the main document that item writers refer to whilst producing test items. What information to include in the specifications and how detailed they must be has been an area of much debate. The main advantage of very detailed specifications that also include sample items is that they enable the production of highly comparable parallel test versions, thus increasing test validity. On the other hand, it's perceived by some that highly detailed specifications suppress item writer creativity and result in multiple clones of the sample item. Empirical research into item writers' use of specifications is rare. Kim and colleagues conducted a case study with 4 inexperienced item writers. Interviews and reflective journals data revealed that the novice item writers were reluctant to use the specifications, which they perceived as abstract and even mysterious, and those item writers preferred to rely on their previous classroom test development experience. Kim and colleagues concluded that item writers needed more specific guidelines for constructing each item and a range of sample items with different difficulty levels. Salisbury, in her doctoral study, compared the performance of experienced and inexperienced item writers in producing listening tasks. She observed that experts were guided by specifications at all times and were swiftly and effectively internalizing key features of specifications, while non-experts frequently forgot the specifications. Novices often had their own ideas about what an item should be like, derived from their teaching experiences. These ideas often overrode the specification requirements. Finally, Al-Lawati, in her doctoral dissertation, conducted interviews and focus groups with 11 experienced item writers working for a large examination board. Item writers reported that they would prefer to have one concise document to refer to, which would contain practical details, for example, text, topic, vocabulary list, and many sample items, including faulty ones. Item writers also said that sample items were a key piece of information they referred to when developing items. In particular, if they were unclear about a specification requirement, they referred to the sample items and copied from them. This is in contrast to Salisbury, who found that experienced item writers were always guided by the specifications. To sum up, empirical research into the use of specifications is scarce and the findings are sometimes contradictory. Moreover, to the best of my knowledge, no longitudinal research has so far investigated how the item writer use of specifications evolve with the development of expertise and as a result of training. Investigating this issue was one of the aims of my doctoral research project. This research project was done with an existing item writing training course. conducted as professional development for British Council China employees. The course was conducted fully online, asynchronously, and it included training in producing items for grammar, vocabulary, and for skills, as well as broader language assessment literacy training. The course covered 6 modules, each lasted 2 weeks, and in the first week of the module, there was mostly input on language assessment literacy issues such as constructs, skills, and subskills, how to produce items of different types, and also analysis of faulty and good quality items. While the second week was fully developed to item writing practice, where participants produced items individually, then reviewed them in groups, then they had a chance to revise the items, and then they submitted the items and received final feedback from their tutors. We tried to make this course reflective and developmental experience. For example, we tried to raise trainees' awareness of what is behind the specifications requirements, hence the extensive language assessment literacy component. We also conducted analysis of item specifications with the trainees, and as you've just heard, there was regular peer and tutor feedback that participants received during the training. This research study employed a mixed method design. In the pre-test, post-test study, an item writing assignment was administered to a group of trainees before and after they took this online item writing training course. After each item writing event, the participants were invited to take part in a stimulated recall interview to gain information on the approach, procedures, techniques that they used while writing items and the difficulties they encountered. 4 course feedback questionnaires were also administered at different points during the course. The participants of the course, as I said before, were 25 British Council China employees who worked at that time as assessment consultants. 6 of them were female, 19 male. Their mean age was 40 years old, and all of them had considerable experience teaching English as a second or foreign language, but they had limited to no item writing experience. The item writing assignment was identical for the pre and post course to allow for valid comparisons. The assignment consisted of 4 tasks. The participants had to write 2 multiple choice grammar items, one at A2 and the other one at C1 level. They also wrote 1 writing prompt at B2 level and 1 gap-filled listening task at B1 level. The participants were provided with the task specifications that contain detailed item requirements, 1 sample item, and the item template. The item quality was analyzed using expert judgment. 3 highly experienced expert judges reviewed the items against detailed quality review checklists. Each criterion was scored on a 3-band scale from 0 to 2. Before the review, the items were anonymized and randomized so that the judges did not know what participant wrote the item or whether the item was written pre or post course. The scores were then de-randomized and analyzed quantitatively using descriptive statistics, comparative statistics, and gain ratio statistics. The interview transcripts and qualitative data from feedback questionnaires were then coded and analyzed using the grounded theory approach. In this presentation, I will mainly rely on the data coded as use of specifications and use of example items. Now I'm moving on to the findings. Wilcoxon signed rank test results revealed that total post-training scores for the A2 and C1 grammar items and for the B1 listening tasks were statistically significantly higher than the pre-training ones, with medium effect size. For the B2 writing prompts, Wilcoxon signed rank tests detected no significant difference in the overall scores. However, most B2 writing prompts already scored quite high prior to the training, so differences in scores might not have been easy to detect. From among the 17 participants interviewed pre-training, only about a third mentioned the specifications. Those who did mention the specifications mostly expressed their attitude to using the specifications, rather than elaborating on how they used the documents. The prevailing attitude was negative. The participants complained that the specifications were long, complex, and difficult to understand, with several participants admitting to not reading the documents carefully. For example, Josh said, "When I realized the extent of the instructions, that is, specifications, my eyes just glazed over." It was also found that the participants sometimes had to retrofit, that is, amend already written items, having noticed that a specification requirement had been overlooked. At the same time, the participants seemed to attach an inflated importance to the example items. A number of participants thought that example items alone were sufficient to provide item writing guidance, with twice as many participants commenting on the example items compared to the specs. Participants perceived the example items as models, with the words model, template, and example item often used as synonyms. Some participants also discussed the role of example items for novice item writers. They believed it was natural for a novice to be led by examples, but they also admitted this was not the approach to adopt throughout their item writing career. Thus, Olivia said, "Obviously, I won't do that for the rest of my life." Some participants showed awareness that they could not use the specifications effectively and requested being trained in using them. For example, in this quote from James. Participants' discussion of the specifications was considerably different after the training. Firstly, participants mentioned the specifications more often. Secondly, they dwelt on the specifications in more detail. They emphasized reading the specifications carefully and trying to attend to all their aspects. I was thinking about the specs, keeping everything, matching everything to the specs. The participants also developed some strategies of working with specifications. For example, they started the item writing by taking time to familiarize themselves with the specs. They were working from two screens, having the specs on one screen and writing items on the other, and they repeatedly referred to the specifications in the process of iterative item writing. That is, they started with the specification, then moved to the item, then back to the specification, then back to the item, and so on. After the training, participants focused on example items much less compared to pre-training. The attitude to the examples changed too. While pre-training, the participants took guidance from the example items much more than from the specifications. Post-training, the examples played a secondary role. For example, in this quote by Olivia, you can see that although she still mentioned the model, she demonstrated a change in approach. She felt more ambitious and she consciously deviated from the model to write a more original item. In addition to the Wilcoxon sign rank tests, the gain ratio technique was used to provide insights into individual item writer variation within the training cohort. Large variations were observed and 4 participant profiles were identified. For a small number of Profile A participants, the pre-training items scored the lowest, so they were called outliers, but the participants produced much higher quality items after the training. Profile B participants produced good quality items before the training, and their post-training items scored even higher, so we call them high achievers. Profile C participants wrote good quality pre-training items, but their corresponding post-training items, surprisingly, scored slightly lower. And Profile D are all other participants who displayed more unique trends that could not be categorized. I will now discuss interview findings for each participant profile in turn. Profile A participants' interview responses revealed that they were guided by the example items more than by the specifications, which they hardly mentioned, if at all, before the training. Unfortunately, the inferences about item requirements that these participants made just from studying the example items were sometimes wrong, which might have been one of the main reasons that their pre-course items received low scores. These participants received considerably higher scores for their items after the training, so probably there was a change in item writing approach. And this comparison of Olivia's interview quotes serves as a good example. You can see that before the training, Olivia's discussion was short and it centered around the model that Olivia was trying to replicate. Well, you can see that her post-training discussion of specifications was more in-depth. Olivia's main preoccupation after the training was in targeting the intended construct, and she used a range of documents, not only the example item, but also the specifications, the core inventory, to clarify it. High achievers, Profile B participants, pre-training revealed that they were generally able to understand the specifications. They also recognized the importance of following the specifications, and they did not overestimate the role of example items. However, they might have been unable to keep the whole set of specifications in their working memory because they had to retrofit, that is, to amend already written items, having noticed that a requirement had been overlooked. After the training, these participants demonstrated more efficient use of the specifications. For example, they took time to study the specs before the item writing event. They referred to the specifications repeatedly while writing items, and having produced an item, they checked it with the specifications again. Notably, they did not normally have to retrofit post-training. Now, moving on to Profile C participants. Pre-training, these participants' ability to use the specifications was similar to Profile B participants. That is, they realized the importance of the specifications and they already had some ability to use them. One reason for the lowest scores this participant's item received after the training was this participant's desire, probably inspired with the training, to explore the boundaries of the specifications by trying to write something that would be substantially different from the example item. This desire might have stemmed from the participants' increased confidence in writing items, improved awareness of the role of the specifications, and the realization that the example item was not the only way to operationalize the specifications. The writing prompts produced by these participants might serve as a good example. The specifications for the writing prompt require the input message to be either an email or a notice. Although the sample item, and there was only one, had an email as the input message. So these participants, before the training, successfully copied the example item, produced an email input message. However, after the training, well, they also could write either an email or a notice, and the example item was was an email. They decided to write something different from what they did before. So they decided to produce a public notice. As a quote by Adam shows, he said, "I wanted to do something different, something I hadn't done before." However, it seems that these participants were not aware of the genre conventions of public notices, and they had no sample item to copy, which resulted in lower item scores. There is a generally held assumption that being native or highly proficient users of the language, item writers will have the knowledge of common genres, so we can ask them write a public notice and they will write it successfully. But this study's findings suggest that this assumption might be wrong. This might point to the need to train item writers in producing text in each genre included in the specifications. It also seems that item writers need multiple sample items that would illustrate varying specification requirements. So for this task, we probably had to provide them with two sample items, one with an email and the other as a notice input message. Moving on to the discussion, I can see three main points to be made from this study. Firstly, the study points to the need to provide item writers with the training in using specifications. Profile A participants, the so-called outliers, were unable to understand or to follow the specifications just by looking at them without having any training. When they were provided with the training during the course, it was effective in developing this trainees' ability to interpret the specifications, so they wrote much better post-course items. Secondly, the study highlighted the importance of strategies in using specifications. Profile B participants, so-called high achievers, demonstrated a developed ability to use the specs following the training. In particular, they reported some strategies that must have helped them in complying with the specification requirements. Such strategies, used by successful item writers, should be researched, studied, and then introduced to all item writers in training. And thirdly, this study results suggest that item writers require multiple sample items to accompany specifications. Profile C participants' problem was that they were not successful at exploring specification boundaries. Multiple item variations can result from the same set of specifications, even most restrictive. It seems that during the training, as well as in operational settings, item writers might benefit from being provided with a range of sample items that reflect the breadth of the specification requirements. This might also help to avoid misinterpretations of the specifications. Finally, this study findings suggest that a focus on examples might be a necessary feature of the early stage of item writing skill development, and it's a natural way in which the item writing skill is acquired. This is in line with what was found in psychology about skill acquisition. The ACT-R theory of skill acquisition, which is the mostly widely used cognitive architecture, states that a skill is learned by converting declarative knowledge into procedural, via the process of proceduralization. The most common way of proceduralization is through using examples, as this quote shows. Learning by examples is supported with empirical evidence. It has been repeatedly observed that initially trainees focus on examples while performing a new task, but with practice they stop looking at examples and they no longer mention them in verbal protocols. This means that when training novice item writers, multiple examples should be provided to them, something that participants in this study also requested, asking for both good and weak examples of items. However, I believe that tutors should be cautious not to make trainees over-reliant on examples and at the expense of studying the specifications, because no number of examples can cover all possible specifications operationalizations, as well as no number of flawed items can account for all types of problems that item writers might have with writing an item. Ultimately, I believe that the process of the item writing skill development should result in a move away from example-based and towards specifications-based performance. Here are the references that I quoted during this presentation. I'd like to thank you again for listening to it, and I'll be very happy now to take your questions.
Thank you, Lena, for sharing with us this interesting research. Let's see if we have any questions from the audience. Please write your comments or your questions in the chat, please. Okay, here there are, let me show you the questions here.
I can see a question from Jane.
Yeah.
Okay, thank you very much. Are there implications from what you have learned for the criteria features of specs that are amenable to teaching to item writers and that help produce items of targeted difficulty and construct coverage for automated item generation? That is very interesting. Jamie, thank you for this question. I did not look into automated item generation, although I do believe that there are lessons to learn for this from my research. I just need to look into it a bit more. What I learned about the features of the specs is that, and I think this is something new that my research also revealed, but there wasn't time to dwell on it during this presentation, that there are two types of specification requirements. One I call mechanical, so something that is easily quantifiable and it's easy for the item writers to check by themselves. For example, the word count. Or they can check the vocabulary frequency by themselves. They just need to learn how to use those tools, and then they can do it. This is something that item writers learn quickly. But there are some specification requirements, and I call them subjective. This is something that depends on subjective judgment, both from item writers when they write the items, and then item reviewers also when they review the item. So this, for example, understanding of the construct, understanding of the authenticity, understanding of the, for example, such things, ADI issues, and all of them are subjective, and this, all of them take much longer for the item writers to acquire. So in terms of, now I'm thinking on my feet now, in terms of automated item generation, I think it will be very easy to replicate the mechanical criteria there. But how to deal with subjective ones, I think we will still need human judgment at this point. What will happen later, I don't know. I hope it answers your question, Jamie. I see another question from Newton Polo Monteiro. How was the training prepared and developed? Or I can give another 1-hour presentation on that, Newton. I'm going to publish an article or a couple of articles about that. We have 3 cohorts of the training. So what I researched was the third cohort of the training. Obviously, the training evolved during those 3 cohorts. I developed the materials for the initial training, although again I modified them, and we had 2 tutors in the third cohort. How it was prepared, it was based on sound research about item writing that exists and is available in the literature, although that's not much. It was based on the constructivist approach to training, meaning that people not only need input to do something, but they need a lot of practice, and they also need communication to move this practice from theoretical into practical ability. Just watch out for future publications. I could go on and on about that, but unfortunately we don't have time. And I think the same question repeated
It's the same
twice.
question, yes.
Yeah, okay. I hope, Newton, I've answered your question as much as I could.
Okay, here there is no more questions. Say thank you. All right. There are no more questions. Olena, thank you very much for coming today. Have a nice day.
Thank you, and thank you all the participants who listened to the presentation, and thanks to Jamie and Newton for your questions.